Welcome back here with Colin Brazier on GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. We're going to take a break from matters Ukraine for a moment. And we're going to ask you this question. You might think that witches were consigned to the annals of medieval history, but I think perhaps you might find you were wrong. Scottish First Minister, the SNP leader, Nicola Sturgeon, has issued a posthumous apology to people who were persecuted as witches in Scotland, saying the deep misogyny that motivated this, quote, colossal injustice is something that modern women still have to live with. Ms Sturgeon was responding to a petition demanding a pardon for the more than 4,000 people in Scotland, the majority of whom were women, who were accused, convicted and often executed under the Witchcraft Act of 1563. The First Minister told the Scottish Parliament that she was acknowledging, quote, the egregious historic injustice and extending a formal posthumous apology to all those who were vilified. Let's turn to Kellie-Jay Keen, founder of Standing for Women, a women's rights organisation. Kellie-Jay, do you feel if you were Scottish, you'd feel better today knowing that witches who were burned at the stake almost 500 years ago have enjoyed a posthumous pardon from Nicola Sturgeon?
Well, I might if Scottish police forces weren't arresting women in their own homes for putting suffragette-coloured ribbons up. I might feel a little bit better. It's a weird one, isn't it? Whilst Scotland really do plough ahead with obliterating women's rights, when you have a man in charge of a rape crisis centre who actually identifies as a woman, who says he will re-educate rape victims into accepting transgender rights, I think Nicola Sturgeon really should look at more pressing and immediate matters. Even in the Scottish census, they defended their position to include gender identity and not biological sex, as I understand it. So she really is ploughing ahead with obliterating women's rights. I don't think helping the memory and legacy of women 500 years ago is going to do much for women in Scotland in 2022.
Just in terms of this idea of the posthumous apology, I mean, this takes us away a little bit from the feminist question, but I just, where's the statute of limitations on this? We've got an American guest in the studio, Sarah Elliott. We'll talk to her about this in a second, but, that American idea of the statute of limitations. How far should we go back with our apologies? Do we ask the French to apologise for the Norman conquest, the Italian government for the Roman invasion? Where does it stop? 500 years does seem a long time ago.
Well, look, if this was an ongoing thing and we really could trace the roots of misogyny back to that defining point and not maybe for the entire existence of humankind, then I think it was an important thing, but it really isn't that. I mean, look, we have women in 2022 are discarded with names akin to which is things like TERF and other names which I won't say in the evening on TV, but this thing, it doesn't come from, misogyny doesn't come from women being found as witches. Women were found as witches because of misogyny, and that misogyny hasn't gone away, and it makes absolutely no difference whether she issues a posthumous apology or not.
I mean, I dare say, Nicola Sturgeon won't talk to us, I imagine, but I imagine her supporters will say, look, she was presented with a petition. She had to make a decision. From this vantage point, it seems like she didn't have to make this posthumous apology. It feels like a political smokescreen. Look at how good a feminist I am and try and ignore the other stuff that you're talking about, Kellie-Jay.
Well, yeah, of course it does. And I think that is where we are in politics right across all of the political spectrum, that people are far more likely to issue some very empty virtue signalling apology in this case and not deal with real current issues that affect everybody, and particularly the women in Scotland. We really do have police forces, both in Scotland, England and Wales, that are arresting women for daring to say that women are adult human females and adult human males are not women.
Sarah Elliott's just going to join this conversation. Sarah.
Yes, I completely agree. I mean, it's absolutely absurd to talk about witches when you're changing the term Mother's Day to Birthing People's Day, and from chest feeding or breastfeeding to chest feeding. It's really amazing how in such a short period of time we've fallen back so much. in terms of our terminology and respect. And you know, I applaud you for what you do, Kellie-Jay, and there are a lot of women out there who are silent. You know, you don't know who they are, but they are speaking up at home with their children, and likewise. And I think this is a trend and a fad that will fade eventually, and we'll look back at this period of history with great disdain.
Kellie-Jay, I know we've said this before, that you are joining us there from the best appointed studio in the Wiltshire area, and that isn't necessarily the best vantage position to look at what's happening in Scotland, but it's something we've discussed many times on GB News and on programmes I've hosted as well, this why there is this apparent mania within SNP politics in particular to be in the vanguard of this movement. I mean, even the sort of J.K. Rowling dimension, she's based there in Edinburgh. So much of this conversation does seem to be focused on Scotland.
Yeah, it's really peculiar, isn't it? I don't know why she has chosen this particular hill to die on, because I really do think it's a rotten, steaming pile of hell. You know, maybe in 500 years' time, the First Minister of Scotland will be apologising for Nicola Sturgeon turning her back so very swiftly on women and women's rights. We just don't know.
Kellie-Jay Keen, good to talk to you. Thanks ever so much, as ever. We've got, in the next few minutes, Neil Oliver, Scotland's best-known historian. I wonder what he makes of a story about a posthumous apology for, it's just me, don't need to go back to Kellie-Jay, what Neil Oliver makes of it. Anyway,